Let freedom ring this afternoon at 2 with Sean Hannity, right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560. The Answer.
5 in the morning, Dan and Amy. The Chicago mayoral primary is already just about 6 weeks away.
I know.
Comes up on you fast, and obviously crowded field. We're trying to get to all of the candidates who want to be gotten to and give them a chance to address some of the issues to our friends and listening audience. And though, we're a center-right audience disproportionately. By the way, in a field of 20 candidates, where it's a race to 15%,
every vote counts, and Republicans vote. You cannot alienate Republicans in this race.
It may be a small percentage, but it turns out to be disproportionately impactful this time around because of the size of the field. And so let's get right to our next guest. He is Gery Chico, and he is a candidate for mayor. Gery, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Nice to be with you again.
So let me start nationally because, of course, national affects local and vice versa. Under Mayor Rahm Emanuel, Chicago was declared a Trump-free zone. And I wonder, under Mayor Gery Chico, if Chicago would remain a Trump-free zone, whatever that means.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I've gone on record as saying I'm for a sanctuary city. I mean, my own roots are immigrant roots here to this city, to this country, and I'm going to continue that policy.
Well, why?
But even before we get to the discussion of sanctuary city, Trump-free zone. In other words, there are federal resources that could be received by the city of Chicago to do things like arrest and prosecute violent criminals. Other benefits that come with a relationship with D.C. Of course, you understand this. So, this sort of demagoguery of Trump-free zone to score cheap political points is my question.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would work with the federal administration for things that Chicago needs. I mean, for example, I'm still waiting for the infrastructure help that we were promised. We've got a lot of work to do in this city with roads, bridges, even schools. I'd like to expand it to try to help build and rebuild our schools. So to the extent that we need to work with the federal government to make those things happen for our city and make our city better, you're darn right I'll be in there. I just saw Governor-elect J.B. Pritzker sitting next to President Trump because I think he lives the same philosophy.
So Paul Vallis, your former co-worker, I know you worked together, you're at the Board of Education, he was the CEO of CPS. He is saying that he thinks you should step down from the race. Susana Mendoza should step down for the race, Preckwinkle and Bill Daley, all because of your ties to Ed Burke.
Well, first of all, we're going to let the voters decide who should be the next mayor of Chicago. I think the next mayor of Chicago is going to come from one of four people. It's going to come from either me, Tony Preckwinkle, Bill Daley, or Susana Mendoza, and that's how I see the field shaking out. So we're going to let the people of the city decide who they want their next mayor to be.
What about Chicago's party ant? Do you think that he has a chance at all?
Who is
that? It's a Twitter account. Never mind. You've got more important things to consider. But on this issue of Ed Burke, I mean, what is your reaction? You're familiar with Ed Burke.
You were at that fundraiser for Tony Preckwinkle at his house back when she ran for Cook County Board President.
So describe your relationship and your reaction to Ed Burke's legal troubles.
Well, Ed Burke's been a friend of mine for many years. I worked for him in the City Council Finance Committee, and obviously I'm disturbed by the allegations and the criminal complaint. And nobody condones that behavior. On the other hand, obviously there's some things we need to take a look at in terms of ethics reform in the city council. The number one being aldermanic prerogative. If you look at most of the source of the problems with the behavior, the bad behavior of aldermen and other officials, but mostly aldermen, it's been this aldermanic prerogative, whether it's the ability to hold up a zoning change, a liquor license, a permit of some kind. That's got to be looked at, and we have to make some reforms right then and there because that's the source of this problem.
Well, that second level of feudal lords called the city council are not going to be happy if you want to do away the feudal system, are they?
Well, that doesn't matter. I mean, we have to do right by the citizens, right? I mean, this is about government for the people, not the other way around. I'm not saying that the aldermen wouldn't have a voice in matters affecting their wards. That would be absurd. On the other hand, having final authority over whether a permit's granted, I don't think that's proper anymore. I mean, if somebody needs a driveway permit to get in and out of their restaurant or their building, that's something that anybody with a proper set of criteria can decide, and they ought to, frankly, be going pretty quickly as long as public safety is protected.
And you had no idea that Alderman Ed Burke was shaking down business owners in his ward?
No, not at all.
Does it surprise you to learn that he is alleged to have done that?
Yes, I am surprised to hear that. That's not the Ed Burke that I knew for so many years that I worked with. I mean, I've seen him do an awful lot of good in this city, and I think that behavior is just very surprising to me.
Well, I mean, but you're a worldly man, and particularly a worldly man as it pertains to Chicago and Illinois politics. How does somebody amass $12 million in campaign cash with relatively, by the modern measures, small donations spread across a lot of people over 50 years, if there's not, frankly, an endemic pay-to-play ethos in terms of how he operates?
Well, I don't see a pay-to-play ethos. I mean, I think a lot of people have worked with this alderman and worked with Alderman Burke over 50 years. You got to remember the time you're talking about here is a half a century.
Mm-hmm.
So after that period of time, anybody in office could amass a fairly large war chest. But pay-to-play, I've never had that experience with the alderman.
What about just going back to the systemic issues like you were talking about, my characterization of the feudal system of city government? Mm-hmm. What about the issue of these inherent conflicts? Ed Burke is a property tax appeals attorney and does other legal matters. Mike Madigan, one would argue, writing property
mm-hmm.
tax law and be a property tax appeals attorney seems conflictual. What about addressing those matters?
Well, I think you go right to I think there's two matters that you need to deal with first and foremost to get to the heart of what we see in these ethics violations. One, I talked about the aldermanic prerogative being readdressed. I think the other one is property tax assessments. I mean, I've been on record, you can even see my commercials right now, talking about giving working families a break from these taxes that they're being hit with. And one of those taxes is property taxes. And if you look at, it's basically, whether it's corrupt or completely inept, we can debate it. But we've got skyscrapers, commercial skyscrapers downtown that are assessed at half of what they're being sold for. That means that when that skyscraper downtown isn't paying its fair share, it's rolling down to other properties, primarily residential, out in the neighborhoods. I've called for that to be looked at deeply, and I'm hoping that Fritz Kagi, who was elected on that very platform, delivers on what he said he would do there. We need to get these assessments straight, and when we do that, we're going to see a lot less of an impulse for people to challenge their property taxes.
No, I think that's fair. Now, just remember, though, one carve-out. Just make sure to continue to keep Luis Gutierrez's home off the rolls. I mean, I think that's the least he's owed after all these years.
So how do you think you're going to generate revenue for the city of Chicago? Are you for casinos? Are you for legalization of marijuana? What's your plan?
Sure. I've gone on record as supporting a number of things. I think I was the first candidate to support the legalization of marijuana. I see it coming in Illinois. I saw what happened in Michigan. We're now in a race to market, and I'm hoping that J.B. Pritzker and the Illinois legislature gets about this quickly with the proper safeguards so that we don't have the Wild West here. But I want Chicago to have its fair share of that tax revenue because we're going to be a driver, just like we are for a lot of things in the state of Illinois. I've urged that the city own a casino, have it properly and professionally managed. That could be hundreds of millions of dollars in new revenue to the city of Chicago, along with another $100+ million in tax revenue from legalizing marijuana. But let's not forget that we have to attack the waste in this city too. We've had an infrastructure trust on the books for 7-8 years right now at $2 million a year, and $2 million may not sound like a lot, but it is a lot. Add up the amount of people that pay taxes to support that. We've had this infrastructure trust on the books, $2 million a year. It's delivered nothing. When I ran in 2011, I said, can we afford an independent clerk and an independent treasurer? They haven't done anything in their entire history. Susanna Mendoza fought me on that at the time, and it cost us $9 to $10 million a year that I think we wasted over the last 8 years. It's $100 million. I mean, we have to take a good, hard look at this stuff and really go at the heart of the matter so that we can have the money to pay for the things that we think are important, like a proper level of police officers, detectives, to get at this unsolved homicide problem that we have in this city. So it's not just a matter of generating new revenue, which I want to do without hurting the working families in this city again. There's another brick and another brick and another brick being put on their back People can't take it anymore. Now we're hearing about, 30 cents a gallon in gasoline? I mean, that's $5-6 a tank for somebody who might have to drive either for a living or to get their kids to and from. We have to be far more sensitive to what's going on here. I will generate the revenue necessary to run this city. I'll eliminate waste, and we'll make this city work again in a way that's fair to working families.
But the problem is those things that you want to fund that are important, and I assume police and fire pensions, for example, would be among them.
Sure.
There's a reason Rahm wanted to borrow $10 billion going out the door to stave off the capsizing of the police and fire pensions. It's because we're not going to be able to gamble and smoke dope to our way to fully funded public sector pensions. And so when you've got police and fire at 20%, I mean, they are death spiraling by any
no doubt about it.
Any responsible actuary. So how do you come up with $35 billion or start to come up with addressing the $35 billion in unfunded liabilities with balloon payments scheduled for as soon as next year?
Well, you've got about $1 billion new dollars you got to come up with over the next 4 years. The reason I proposed these and other measures, I also proposed a 1.2% increase on the real estate transfer tax for homes over $1 million in the city. I'm waiting for the new revenue from sports betting. It's a very dynamic picture. I don't think we're going to get there only with these measures that I've proposed, even with cuts to the waste that I see, cuts to the budget with the waste that I see. But I'll tell you one thing, it's the right impulse to look at monies that aren't going to be on the backs of working families the way we've done over the last 4 to 8 years. I want to be really, really careful in generating new money that helps solve our problems. I'm not saying it's going to get us all the way there, but I'll tell you this. I think the taxpayers are going to appreciate that somebody's approaching this problem without simply an impulse to increase the property tax or sales tax.
There's another issue that it continues to confound me in terms of the relative indifference with which it's been met, and that is the sex abuse scandal in the Chicago public school system, a story over the holidays of a guy who was employed by CPS, accused of molesting children outside of the district, continued to be employed by CPS. Sounds like the teachers union ran cover for him. Certainly that's what the Tribune reporting seemed to indicate. I mean, there needs to be more than just sort of policies and procedures in place to deal with this. What would you do as somebody who was chairman of the CPS board for a time? What would you do to address and root out this seeming systemic problem within CPS that's just been unearthed recently by the Tribune?
Well, first of all, we give no safe harbor or no cover to any of these people. That's number one. Number two, as you pointed out, you can have all the policies and procedures in the world on the books. Unless there's an obsessive modeling of behavior from the top that we're not going to accept this and it permeates down through the entire system, you won't get at it. We have to make a system available. Here's what was happening before. People were basically hiding this behavior at the school level, and a lot of it wasn't even coming up to the top until the very end. We need to make a culture over there, and that starts with the modeling of the behavior at the top that makes it wide open for people to report this kind of activity. We obviously need to have some systems buttoned up a little bit that gives us the information on backgrounds of people we're hiring, whether they're from Illinois or from out of state, to enable people to make these determinations about whether somebody's fit to be in a classroom.
Not only Ed Burke in court, on the same day, Alderman Munoz was in court. Have you spoken with him since he made his first court appearance?
No, I haven't spoken with Rick Munoz. I think it's a very sad situation. I know him. I know his wife, and I'm very sad to see what happened there. I don't know where that goes in that relationship, but I think it's just a sad day when that happens. And as Rick has admitted before, I mean, addiction's a powerful thing, and it really alters your behavior. And I hope he gets the help that's necessary to straighten out his life.
Should he step down?
I don't tell any alderman what to do in terms of stepping down. I think that's a decision that he has to make. I mean, if he's going to get treatment for his behavior, I mean, he's only got 4 months left in his term. That's going to be a decision that he has to make. I mean, obviously, if his behavior gets worse or there's something else that happens that comes out, then, maybe we'll have a different opinion at that time.
He is Gery Chico, candidate for mayor. Gery, the website where people can get more information on your campaign?
ChicoForMayor.com, and we take all help we can get, and I'm asking your voters for their support on February 26th. I mean, this is a nonpartisan election. I think people ought to look at the candidates and see who's reasonable and who they think has the experience. I believe I have the experience to operate this city fairly going forward, and I'd love to have your support.
And I have to tell you, I love your new commercials. Those are effective.
Oh, good. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it very much.
Already sucking up for a city contract.
No.
Gery, Chico, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.